I'd like to welcome Paul Neeley to the stage, who's sitting right here. Paul is the founder of a search engine called Yossarian Lives, which is a metaphorical search engine. He can explain what that means. He's going to talk about the future of search and why Google isn't the future of search anymore. Paul.
Oh, perfect. Great, thank you, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay, yeah, very excited to be here and excited to share some thoughts on the future of search. So I wanted to begin just, again, kind of reiterate what Tom was saying about the future. Graduated from a course, actually, at the Royal College of Art in speculative design, and so have spent a lot of time actually learning about emerging technologies and then designing future products and services to imagine the implications of those technologies. And one of the things I love about opportunities like this to talk about the future is that it is not about predicting kind of what is probable or even what is plausible, understanding what is possible and then even the edges of impossibility. But the conversations about all of these kind of future moments and what's coming allow us to begin to talk about what is preferable. And what is kind of our desired state moving forward. And again, as we're making choices, as we're designing things in this moment, we're kind of guiding that direction forward. So in talking about search, I want to begin by giving you a brand new frame to address search. I'm going to really quickly go through an increasing mirror world fidelity, talk about graphs, predictive analytics, and new interactions with search. And then I'll briefly talk about some directions and some dangers that I see, and then want to introduce the work that we're doing at Yossarian Lives, looking at metaphorical search. So to begin with a kind of new frame on search, so I want all of you to think about internet search as it exists today, kind of conjure that image in your mind. And now I'm going to read your mind. How many of you were imagining this as yeah, okay? Got a few people in the back, Bing users or something that didn't think of this. This is as we imagine internet search today. But if you take away one thing from the talk today, this is not search. This is not what search actually is. And even thinking about search in this term actually hampers a lot of the opportunities in this space. So what is search? Well, I think about it very generally. Just the definition, to find something by looking or otherwise seeking carefully and thoroughly. So anytime we're looking for something, that is search. Or as I like to think about it, a kind of question, a query, a need. There's some sort of process that goes on, and then there's an answer to that. And that process that goes on is search. So think about search in the broadest possible terms. So in those terms, then, what is the ultimate search engine? And kind of talking about the future, Larry Page back in 2004 said the ultimate search engine would basically understand everything in the world and would always give you the right thing. And he goes on to say we're a long ways from that, but actually there have been some amazing progress in this space in the last few years, and we're getting to this place where kind of an understanding of our world is dramatically increasing, and opportunities to give us kind of always the right answer become more and more interesting. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So I want to give one frame to think about how then search is created or how it comes about. So think about reality, think about everything that exists, everything you can see and touch. And the beginning of search starts with acquisition. So we translate reality into data. So we video, audio, any sort of mental image, text, any of that information goes and becomes data. We store that data, and then we analyze that data, or we make sense of it in different ways. And then the other part of search is then retrieval. So querying that data or that model of reality, and then kind of answering our questions through those queries. So we'll talk a little bit about acquisition, about this model of reality, and then retrieval as it exists. So one more issue, just kind of give you a new frame about search, is time becomes really critical. So we have reality, this moment that is happening, and we then create models of this reality. We have kind of a current state for what is happening now. That we also have kind of past state or historic views of this space, and all of that helps us create predictive moments. The other thing I just mentioned, again, as it's always evolving through time, all of our models are always incomplete. So no matter what we kind of model or understand of reality, it's not as kind of beautiful and rich and complex as reality is. Okay, so I want to get into increasing mirror world fidelity. So the Google Maps team often talks about a mirror world. And literally their goal is to mirror everything in the world, to create a model of the entire world as it exists today. And they've just released the new Google Maps 3D, where they've actually rendered the entire world from satellite imagery, from the cars that I'm sure you've seen around. The trikes now exist. They've also introduced the Google Backpack, right? So each of these things giving us a higher fidelity of more and more of the space, turning this kind of world into data and giving us a model that we can begin to query, ask questions, and begin to search. And I apply that frame of acquisition essentially to any time you see any type of sensor or device. Don't think about this as a phone. Think about this as a device for mapping the world and increasing the fidelity of this mirror world that we're using. So when you see a device like Google Glass that's coming, interesting to record video, but more interesting about the additional fidelity that we're getting to this model of the existing space. Okay? So anytime you see any type of sensor, realize that we're increasing our understanding or increasing this model of the world. Okay? Great. So the next study is graphs. How many people are familiar with graphs or know about graphs? You've probably heard about graph is generally just a map of relationships between objects and different types of things. And the graph you're probably most familiar with is the social graph, now the open graph. And you're probably intimately involved with the creation of this graph. Every time you like someone, have a friend, end a relationship, all of that information helps us to build this graph. And it's really phenomenal, and it's kind of mind-boggling to understand what this graph begins to mean. Billions of nodes, billions upon billions of edges, and the type of understanding that we have from the world of this graph is quite phenomenal. And the technical aspects of storage and analytics that are going on to make sense of this graph couldn't have even been imagined maybe 10 years ago, or could have been imagined, but were not possible. And the breakthroughs that are happening are quite exciting. Something that just launched a couple of months ago, Google flipped the switch on the knowledge graph. Have people been familiar with this? So this is quite a big thing. In the past, Google was essentially an index of web pages, ranked web pages. And what they've done is they've added now this knowledge graph, which is essentially now a sort of understanding of the world and of relationships between things. And you'll see it showing up on that far side of your Google search. When you search for entities, for people, we get an understanding of what those things are. So I think eventually graphs, this is how we'll begin to interact with the world. Instead of asking and searching for a web page that we're looking for, we actually find the entity, find the individual, find the thing in the graph, and the search essentially understands its relationships or its place in the world. A few more ideas really quickly. Predictive analytics. So once we have acquired the data, once we've now mapped it, we've graphed it, we've made sense of it, it becomes really exciting and possibly a little bit scary about what we can do with it. I'll mention one movement really quickly, the quantified self. If you haven't had a chance to look at some of this, it's the idea of personal analytics. So you begin to map your own behaviors and then use that information to model future behaviors. People are using it for health reasons, for productivity, and essentially changing their life through these models of their own personal data. And at the population level, it's getting really exciting. There's a company, 100 plus, out in the Bay Area that now has 25 million de-identified medical records, and can actually, from pictures of your lunchtime meal, begin to modify and understand the effect that will have on your longer life going forward. So the predictive values of some of these larger graph data sets become really, really interesting. There was an expose in the New York Times earlier this year on Target, which is a retailer in the United States, and they have a pregnancy predictor. And from about 25 different items of purchase, looking at all of their purchase data, they can tell whether someone's pregnant or not, and even identify within about a 2-week window what the due date is. And they've even for a time, were actually using it to introduce coupons into the community, congratulating people on their coming child. Again, just from their purchase history. And they shared one anecdote of a terribly frustrated father who had received the coupons addressed to his 17-year-old daughter, and was furious at the store and the store manager. 2 weeks later, called back apologetic. Had learned that his daughter was in fact pregnant, but the algorithm had identified that before circumstances within the family had revealed that information. So these sorts of predictive analytics and power of the graph become really interesting. One of the things it allows us to do is preempt search, right? So the more information I have about you, the more I can perhaps guess what you're going to need. Google again just flipped the switch on what's called now, which based on your location, your context, your meetings, and the other things going on, will provide you information that they believe that you would have searched for. So maps to your next appointment, scores of a football club that you might be interested in following. But again, all predictive analytics based on our knowledge of the graph. Okay, and the last thing I kind of want to mention quickly is new interactions. So again, that search bar is not the interaction with the graph. Watson. Did anyone see Watson in the United States? This is the IBM kind of computer that was designed to play Jeopardy. Watson was absolutely phenomenal and kind of destroyed the other competitors. And essentially, the big breakthrough was that Watson was able just to listen to the questions as any other contestant and then answer these kind of queries on the fly faster than opponents were able to do so. And it seems now that half of the audience is completely blinded by the sun. So sorry. I'll describe the images in depth too. But this sort of power was, 2 years ago was phenomenal to think about an interaction by voice and answering questions, searching in that manner. But we're here now with Siri and with other products on the market. That sort of interaction, this natural language interaction is possible. And Tom mentioned it, coming right around the corner. This is an emotive headset. Actually, a number of games are being played in this way, but reading brain waves and allowing individuals to interact with systems on brain waves. And just also some research that just came out, the movement of an avatar robot by essentially thinking about the movement. So someone in a functional MRI then moving the system. So a little further out, but think about now Google Glass on my mind, and additional contextual information for the search is coming from what I'm thinking about. Might I be able to form questions in my mind and then have those answered? So further down the road, but coming, and those sorts of interfaces are how we'll interact with these data sets in the future. So I just want to talk about, I guess, directions first. Think about kind of always-on acquisition of more and more information and building our graph or our models of the world. It becomes predictive and preemptive, and these graphs grow larger and kind of more important and allow new sorts of questions with the data. And then on the dangers, I just mentioned some things that you'll hear about in this space that will be important. Filter bubble, where the filters of this graph begin to become important on how we're kind of trained to think and understand the world. Privacy concerns, also private information universe. Essentially, all of this data is incredibly powerful, and it's owned by companies and corporations, and this sort of information is not available freely to the public. Incomplete or incorrect graph, and then one thing I kind of we'll talk a little bit more in depth is diversity loss. So when we have a large graph that we're then it becomes self-referential, and we lose some of the different ways that people think about the world because the graph teaches us about a certain way to think. Okay, so hopefully if one thing you got out of that was don't think about search as a search bar, but there's some very interesting things. Think about it as data acquisition, think about it as a model of reality, and think about it as new types of interface with that information. I want to just close with a little information about what we're doing at Yossarian Lives. We're talking about it as metaphorical search. So essentially, we started with the place that today's internet search and personalization has a problem in that it tells us what the world already knows. So if you think about Google Instant, for example, before you can even finish typing in your query, it's already returned the results of what everyone else has searched for. So instead of helping us kind of expand our understanding of a topic, it reinforces existing knowledge and collapses possibilities. We've even heard these called junk food algorithms. People are becoming quite concerned about them. So we don't want you to know what everyone else knows. We want you to generate new knowledge. And I'll show you how we approach this in search terms. Okay, so that's very difficult to see, but imagine kind of a graph of connections between different concepts and ideas. And current search will take your query and then return results that are closely related to it. They're literal returns for your query. And at Yossarian Lives, we do something slightly differently. We take your query, we understand the structural attributes or components of that idea, and then we search the entire graph for other ideas from different domains that share similar structural attributes. So what we're essentially talking about is a metaphorical link between ideas from different domains. So take, for example, love is a river, right? Love is not a river. The statement's patently false. But when we understand it metaphorically, we have this flash of insight, right? Love ebbs and flows. It's ever-changing. It has a source. It's difficult to control. All of these attributes of river help us to see love in a whole new way. So let's take a concrete example then. Let's say that you're a designer asked to reimagine the emergency department of the future. Well, we search emergency department in Google and we get everything the world currently knows about emergency departments as they exist today, right? We're reinforcing existing knowledge through that search. So enter that same query into Yossarian Lives and we return something like this. So an F1 pit crew. I'm seeing a few smiles there. So where the roles, the technology, and the processes of the pit crew help us to see the emergency department in a whole new way. And this metaphor is actually currently active in the healthcare space. A number of exciting innovations in emergency care delivery have come directly from exploring F1 pit crew and some of the activities and processes in that space. So that's what Yossarian Lives does. So we think it's a valuable tool for designers, for artists, for engineers, scientists. It's for anyone who's on the edge of their knowledge field, looking to generate new ideas or new knowledge. We started early last year with initial algorithms, had a Deutsche Bank award that funded development of prototypes for a term, image, and document search. Have been fortunate to have a bit of success in some of the startup scene here, and we're now at a private alpha. You're welcome to sign up on the website, and we're rolling that out, moving towards a beta towards the end of the year. It's also been great to get feedback from the public, and it's been interesting to hear how these ideas are kind of resonating and the opportunities in metaphorical search. And then I also just introduced our team really quickly. Actually, Daniel Foster Smith, my co-founder, is here with us. Designer and developer and leading up kind of that end of the search. And also Katya Shatova, a computational linguist, just finished her PhD up at Cambridge. And she's helping us out with a number of the bits of the algorithm. And then myself, background at Unilever, Mayo Clinic, an MA in Design Interactions, and undergrad from Northwestern. So a lot of work ahead, but we're actually very excited about the potential of metaphorical search and be delighted for all of you to try it out. And we think it's definitely one thing that Google and the rest of the search world is missing, and a huge opportunity to use these graphs to generate new ideas rather than reinforcing existing knowns. So thank you very much.